pregnant woman was struck by lightning on her way home. Before she died, she gave birth to a strange baby boy. His skin was deathly pale and completely hairless. His father took one look at him, felt disgusted, and abandoned him without a second thought. Sensing something, the baby immediately cried loudly. The doctor rushed over to check on him, only to find that his brainwave readings were unusually dense. It meant that from birth, he had an intellect far beyond ordinary people. His grandfather hid him in a cellar on their farm and never let him outside, until one day, 16 years later, his grandfather suddenly died of a heart attack. When the police came, they learned from a neighbor about the boy's existence. Fearing that the boy, who had never interacted with the outside world, might have turned into some sort of wild man, Sheriff Barnum quickly called social worker Jesse to discuss how to approach him. The two cautiously entered the basement, only to be surprised by how unexpectedly tidy it was. They saw the boy curled up in a dark corner. Jesse gently reached out her hand, softly coaxing him to come out. But when they finally saw his face clearly, both were stunned. His skin was as white as snow, and his eyes glowed with an eerie red light. No wonder the neighbors described him as ghost-like. The sheriff asked him some basic questions. He answered that his name was Powder. From his calm and confident manner, they could tell he was a well-mannered boy, clearly well-educated. Jesse casually picked up a book, never expecting anyone to enjoy something so difficult to read. Powder told her to turn to any page she liked, then recited the contents word for word. Jesse was astonished, looking around at the shelves full of books. She asked if he could recite all of them. Powder replied yes, but this was just the tip of the iceberg of his extraordinary mind. When they learned that his grandfather had died and the government was taking the house, Jesse decided to take him to a boys' home she ran. This was the first time Powder had ever left the house, but as soon as he got near the police car, it began to sound its siren on its own. The sheriff felt uneasy and looked around, noticing that the roof was covered with lightning rods. He suddenly remembered the coroner's report. Although the grandfather had died of natural causes, his body was still full of electrical current. The sheriff decided to keep an eye on Powder. By evening, Powder and Jesse arrived at the boy's home. Because of his unusual appearance, he immediately drew everyone's attention. People often show unprovoked malice toward those who are different. The very next day, Powder became the target of mockery and ridicule. He chose to ignore it, but that only made others more curious. Finally, a bully named John lost his patience. He led a group of followers over, mocked Powder's appearance, and asked if he knew the rules of the boys' home. When Powder still didn't respond, John grew impatient. He grabbed Powder's lunch tray and told him to balance a spoon on his nose, hoping to humiliate him. The others gathered to watch. After a moment's thought, Powder took the spoon. Just when everyone thought he was going to give in, he did something strange. He stood the spoon upright on the table. The crowd looked puzzled. Then, in the next second, all the metal cutlery in the cafeteria flew toward him. Everyone was left gaping in shock. But the show wasn't over. A spoon from a tray rose into the air and floated toward him. This was Powder's second ability. He could control metal with magnetism. Yet instead of earning admiration, this only made people see him as a monster and hate him even more. After that, Jesse enrolled him in high school, hoping he could quickly adapt to society. But on his very first physics class, Powder got into trouble. The science teacher, Donald, was explaining electricity to the students when he switched on a device. For some reason, the sizzling sound of the current made Powder feel anxious and restless. The metal objects on the desk also began to react. He tried hard to control himself, but the growing current seemed to echo the turmoil in his heart. The next second, a bolt of electricity suddenly shot across the classroom and struck Powder right in the chest. The students were all shocked. Donald froze for a moment before snapping out of it. He quickly grabbed a chair and smashed the device. Finally stopping the accident, he rushed over to check on Powder, but the moment he touched him, the hair on his arm stood up and a strange wave of pleasure ran through him. Donald instantly realized this boy was far from ordinary. He sent him to the hospital for a full examination. As expected, the results left everyone stunned. Powder not only had a body far beyond ordinary human standards, but his intelligence also surpassed that of any genius in the world. Experts immediately erupted in excitement, urging him to pursue scientific research, saying he could make great contributions to humanity. But what they didn't know was that Powder's third ability was to hear people's thoughts. The self-serving, profit-driven calculations in their minds filled him with deep disgust. All he wanted now was to go home, to hide forever in that dark but safe basement. Once this thought took root, it became impossible to suppress. One day, he found the chance to slip away from the boys' home. Perhaps the outside world made him feel more at ease. When a little dog ran up barking at him, he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he stroked it affectionately. Just then, a girl ran over. Powder immediately recognized her as Lindsay, his classmate. Her aura felt so pure that Powder quickly let down his guard. They chatted happily for a while, and for the first time, Powder experienced what it felt like to have a crush on a girl. But soon, Sheriff Barnum found him and took him back to the boy's home. By now, Powder had seen through the coldness of human nature. He no longer wanted to interact with people and preferred to communicate with animals instead. When he had free time, he would place his hands on the ground, focusing his thoughts to send signals to nature. Moments later, small animals would emerge from the fallen leaves to play with him. But one day, he ran into John, the school bully, who was hunting in the woods. Without a word, John pointed his shotgun at Powder to scare him. Just then, a gunshot rang out from the distance. John ended his prank, and the three of them rushed toward the sound. They found it was the deputy, Harley Duncan, who had just shot a doe. He proudly boasted about his marksmanship, claiming the deer hadn't felt any pain. Powder found him cold-blooded. He knelt beside the deer, gently touching its wound while holding Harley's hand at the same time. In that instant, a wave of pain shot through Harley's entire body. He fell to the ground, writhing in agony, feeling the deer's fear and suffering. As the conduit, Powder felt it too. This was his fourth ability, to feel all living things and let all living things feel him. This experience profoundly changed Harley, leading him to give up hunting forever. After returning to the boys' home, Jesse sat down to talk with Powder. This time he made his feelings clear. He said he had no interest in anything about humans. All he wanted was to go home. But Jessie was just an ordinary person. How could she possibly understand the pain of a genius? She kept persuading him to give up the idea. Ooh, a friend doesn't lock you up. A friend doesn't take you away from your home. That was when Powder revealed his fifth ability. It was also the first time he vented his emotions. Even though it was powerful enough to cause destruction, his conscience never allowed him to harm anyone. After that moment, Jesse seemed to finally understand how he felt. Later, Sheriff Barnum heard about Powder's telepathic gift. He met with Powder privately, hoping the boy could help him with something. The sheriff's wife had been in a vegetative state for years. Doctors said she was constantly in pain, yet she still refused to let go of life. He desperately wanted to know why. Powder gently placed his hand on the woman's forehead and told the sheriff to hold his hand. Through the telepathic connection, he finally learned his wife's thoughts. It turned out she had always deeply loved both him and their son. She knew the father and son had a strained relationship. She feared that if she left, the two would completely cut ties. So she had been holding on all this time just to make sure they reconciled. Her only wish was for them to make peace. Hearing this, the sheriff broke down in tears, promising his wife that he would reconcile with their son. Though she couldn't wake up, she smiled upon hearing his words, and in her husband's gentle embrace, she peacefully passed away. Not long after, the sheriff's son returned. When he learned of his mother's wish, he finally set aside his pride and reconciled with his father. The two hugged tightly, without saying a word, but that silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. Powder watched this scene, his heart full of longing. It made him even more determined to go home. The next day, Powder went to say goodbye to Lindsay. They talked a lot once again. In their sincere conversation, he saw Lindsay's lack of confidence, and she saw his loneliness. Two pure hearts drew closer, sparking a pure and innocent love. Their natural kiss felt so right in the moment, but it was unfortunately witnessed by Lindsay's father. He despised Powder's appearance and abilities and forcefully took his daughter away, ending their relationship. Back at the boys' home, Powder never spoke another word. He quietly packed his belongings, planning to leave the place that never belonged to him. But just as he was about to go, he ran into John, the school bully, and his gang. They humiliated him, stripping off all his clothes and shoving him into a muddy puddle. Little did they know, the sky had begun flashing with lightning. Their payback was about to arrive. A heavy rain poured down. John suddenly collapsed, his heart stopping. While everyone panicked, Powder knelt beside him, placing his hands on John's chest like defibrillators. He released bursts of electricity, shocking his heart again and again. No one expected John to be revived. He seemed to awaken some sense of conscience. Though he couldn't speak yet, he held Powder's hand to show his gratitude and eventually helped him escape from the boys' home. After many twists and turns, Powder finally returned to his farmhouse he had longed for in his heart. Unfortunately, it was emptied, and all possessions were removed by the bank. He could only sit in the basement, feeling that solitude that belonged to him alone. Not long after, Jessie came to find him. Although she wasn't the one who understood Jerry the most, she was the one who cared for him the most. Jessie apologized to Powder. Back then, she had insisted on taking him away, yet she had failed to make him feel happiness. She asked him to trust her one more time, promising she would try her best to find the place where he truly belonged. Hearing this, tears welled up in Powder's eyes until they finally burst. Like a child, he threw himself into Jessie's arms. This was the purest human affection he had always longed for. Not long after, the science teacher, Donald, also arrived. They were ready to take Powder away from this place. But just then, 2 police cars drove toward them. Fortunately, one of the officers was Sheriff Barnum. He knew Powder was a kind boy, so he felt compassion and wanted to pretend he hadn't seen anything, letting them leave. But the deputy refused. While they were arguing, thunder rumbled across the sky. Powder suddenly had a strange feeling, as if he was hearing the call of God. He ran toward the open field. The sky was filled with thunder and lightning, and a massive bolt descended, striking Powder. In a brilliant flash of white light, his body dissolved into countless particles of light, floating into the air and merging with the energy of the universe. He had returned to where he came from, in the purest way possible.